plunge and sauna might be some of the hottest biohacks, but are they actually healthy or are they taking you in the wrong direction? In this week's podcast episode, we dive into the science and how contrast therapy, or the oscillation between cold and hot, works, the common mistakes, how to do it properly, how to build wellness into your lifestyle without uprooting your lifestyle, our guests' daily wellness essentials, a simple checklist you can use to make sure that every day is getting you healthier while at the same time being enjoyable and making you happier. We touch on the topic of water, why it's much more than just simple H2O molecules, the power of bathing, also called balneotherapy. We touch on breathwork and intermittent hypoxic training. Our guest shares an essential and free hack to purify the water coming out of your bathtub or even shower. It's great for traveling. I've actually been using it here in India. And best of all, he shares the process of health optimization in a lighthearted and fun way. Our guest this week is Dr. Marc Cohen. He's a rare combination of a medical doctor, an entrepreneur, a university professor, a poet, an author, a wellness trailblazer, and my favorite, a perpetual student of life. He aims to co-create a culture of wellness that infects the world. Dr. Marc has been researching and practicing integrative medicine for more than 30 years and has spent more than 20 years as a university professor teaching a lot of the topics that we talk about on this show: nutrition, herbal medicine, meditation, yoga, acupuncture, detoxification, saunas, hot springs, cold plunges, a lot of the natural biohacks that have become quite popular over the last couple of years. He has published more than 100 peer-reviewed scientific papers and many books and technical texts on wellness and natural medicine. If you want to try his products, if you want to check out his work, his research, or my favorite, his wellness poems, you can find those in the show notes for this episode at mindbodypeak.com/154. This podcast is sponsored by Outlier, and specifically Outlier's brand new 14-day longevity challenge. Dr. Marc, welcome to Mind Body Peak Performance.
Thank you, Nick. It's great to be with you.
I'm excited for this one because a lot of people talk about bridging the ancestral and the modern advanced science. Few people actually have extensive backgrounds in both. You seem to really bridge that gap. So today we'll talk a lot about your background, the research you conducted, your insights from 30 years practicing and researching holistic health, and a whole lot more.
Great. So I've had all these different interests over my career, and I just thought it was my ADHD that I love juggling different ideas and different projects. But I've actually realized now, I've just turned 60, that what I'm really about is ancient future medicine. So it's all the different practices that our hominid ancestors practiced that were super primitive, but that they're also so obvious that every great tradition and every master physician prescribed them, that modern science can't fully understand, but they're so practical and easy. You can do them at home by yourself without much cost, training, or equipment. And those practices include bathing, so hot and cold bathing, the use of herbs, the use of fermentation, the use of honey, and basic lifestyle habits and skills and things like acupressure, but just lifestyle practices that you can do at home for yourself, but have intense impact on your physiology and your health. So that's sort of the areas I've done a lot of research. I'm heavily involved in the hot spring industry. I've done a lot of sauna research. I'm a part owner of a hot spring in New Zealand, and the medical director of a hot spring group. So we do a lot of contrast bathing. I train people to do hot and cold ice bathing and sauna bathing, and guide people through those experiences. But I've also written textbooks up here on herbs and supplements. Done a lot of work with. I have a kombucha vinegar company where we make probiotic kombucha vinegar infused with leaves, roots, flowers, fruits, and fungi. And we actually did the first ever human clinical trial of kombucha, which was published last year, and did a metagenomic study and a physicochemical study on that, looking at the microbiome in the kombucha. And I've also done a lot of work in the beauty and the wellness industry, working with resorts and hotels and that side, and bringing those all together under this banner of ancient future medicine, sort of brought a lot of like my disparate areas of my life together. And now I work with a whole lot of different companies. I work with a medical cannabis company, with a hot spring company, with a kombucha company, with a honey company, making like super high grade Manuka honey. But it all sort of comes together now. And I'm still a university professor, an adjunct position at 2 different universities. I'm still doing ongoing research. And the products I develop, I'm happy to have science-based products and develop like the best products in the world, but I'm also happy to teach you how to do it at home yourself for free.
Nice. Yeah, let's start off. There's a lot of different ways we can take this, but we'll do a warm up just to kick things off. And that is, what are the unusual non-negotiables you've done so far today for your health, your performance, and your bioharmony?
So the things I've done today, had a great night's sleep. I've been bathing today. Did a contrast shower. Eating really nutritious food. I mean, I've got a recipe for wellness that I pretty much follow. And over the years, I've condensed a lot of medical wisdom. I've collected a lot of medical wisdom, and I've tried to condense it down. And a lot of it's turned out as poetry. So one of the poems I have is called "The Recipe for Wellness," and I think I pretty much followed that today. So the recipe for wellness is super simple. It's bathe in beautiful water, prepare delicious food, make the most of every breath, dance through every mood. Tend the soil beneath your feet, embrace sunshine from above, share your gifts with all the world, and fill your life with love.
I'm all about simplifying things, and having a simple poem like that you could even print out and just use it as like a checklist almost. And then eventually you learn the lyrics and you just can run through that in the middle of your day, the beginning of your day, the end of your day, and figure out what you're missing. You've really made it quite simple. But one thing you've mentioned so far several times, and that is the importance of bathing. And I think for most people, myself included, I had previously thought it was just something you do to wash off the dirt and to clean yourself, mainly for aesthetic purposes. But there seems to be a lot more going on. Why are you such a fan of bathing?
Wow. So we could do a whole show on this. So water is like the most mysterious, magical, complex substance in the universe. If you count the molecules in your body, rather than you're about 2/3 water by mass or by volume. But if you count the molecules, you're 99.9% water, because water's tiny compared to protein or collagen or nucleic acids, etc. So water is fundamentally the operating system for our consciousness. Yeah. So water, and being in touch with water, it has incredible sensual feelings, grounding feelings. It connects us with the world. But then bathing has all these other applications. So in bathing, you can expose yourself to temperature changes that are life-threatening and be 100% under control. Because all life must exist in the Goldilocks zone between too hot and too cold. And the only reason why there's life on Earth is we're in the Goldilocks zone where water can exist in solid, liquid, and gas forms. So if you're too hot for too long, you die. If you're too cold for too long, you die. And yet in bathing, we can expose ourselves to cold or to heat and really stress ourselves with a life-threatening stress that we're in 100% control of. The other thing is, when you're bathing, you can also be in thermo-neutral water, and you can be buoyant, and you can be really in homeostasis. So you can be at rest, in total balance. And there's a lot of practices. I have a whole program which I talk about extreme wellness. And that's when we go to the extremes of our physiology. And there are 5 main elements of life, which is water, glucose, oxygen, temperature, and carbon dioxide. And they're the elements of the equation of photosynthesis and respiration. And we can take ourselves to the limits of each of those. And when you're at the limit, you're at a physiological edge. And we can then practice being relaxed while we're stressed. So you can be dehydrated, you can overhydrate, you can feast or fast, you can do hot and cold bathing, you can hyperventilate and or hold your breath, and you can do nothing or you can do everything in flow. So what I like to do is I like to go to an extreme when I'm stressed, and in a controlled stress, and practice relaxing while I'm stressed. And then, just like you do in a yoga class, where you stretch your muscle, and there's a point where you're stretching where your body says stop. If you go any further, you're going to hurt yourself. And at that point, you stop and you just do some relaxed breaths. So you practice being relaxed while you're under that stress. And that's really great. It's a great test for your resilience. It activates all your homeostatic responses, from the molecular, heat shock protein level to the cellular to the organ level. But then, just like in a yoga class, once you've done the stretches, you then just relax in Shavasana and corpse pose, and you practice being relaxed while you're relaxed. And there's a saying in Eastern wisdom that the greatest movement comes from the stillest point. So if you can be totally still at one, in total homeostasis, then that gives you the anchor to act in all your other responses. So whether you're doing martial arts or juggling or mental juggling, if you have a still point that you can have your center, your frame that comes from that, then it gives you the biggest ability to reach out in different directions and then come back to that center. So cultivating that still point, which is actually the whole purpose of yoga. Yoga is about union, the union of mind and body through the breath. And the hatha yoga is really designed to create a still point so you can meditate. And the meditation is designed to create, no mind, to cultivate that still point. So I really love cultivating that point of absolute stillness. And it's best done after you've actually cultivated the maximal movement. And to move your physiology, you need to stress your physiology and through those 5 elements. And I call them the channels of elimination, which is your bladder, your bowel, your breath, your body, and your brain. So your bladder, is for water, your bowel is for glucose, your breath is for oxygen, your body is for temperature, and your brain is for carbon dioxide and activity. So you can stress each of those organs, and then you can come back into balance. And that's just a really great way to make sure that your body can cope with stresses that are out of your control by practicing stress that's in your control.
Yes, exactly. It's like you get the benefits while you're doing it, but then the most important part is the personal resilience you build by successfully navigating through those, so that when life happens and a curveball comes your way that you couldn't possibly have foreseen, that you're able to maintain that composure because of the neural link you create by practicing over and over again. You mentioned several times that the important part is to regain your composure and to relax during stress. And of course, the breath is one of the most powerful tools to do that. How else? Say I'm in a hot sauna or a very cold plunge or some other deliberate, temporary, acute stressor. How else can I relax myself without using the breath, or in addition to using the breath?
Well, they call that the hormetic stress response. And so that's causing stress that forces your body to adapt and become more resilient. And you can do that through all sorts of stress. So I mean, just stretching, doing yoga or just a stretch, there's a point where I call it the point of forced mindfulness, where your body demands your attention of your mind because it starts to hurt. And at that point, and that can be a point in a sauna where you're heating up and your body says, hey, time to get out. It's getting too hot in here. Or in an ice bath, which is, hey, it's really cold. We're struggling here. It's time to get out. So that point of forced mindfulness is your edge. That is your body, or your body telling your mind, hey, you're at the edge of your ability to tolerate this easily. And at that point, you need to use the breath to connect the mind and the body. Because the forced mindfulness is your body is demanding attention from your mind, saying, hey, we need to change what's going on here because it's getting out of control. And you can then take over control by having relaxed breathing. So if you're in an ice bath, ice bath's a great example. Where when you go into an ice bath, the immediate response is actually to hyperventilate, and you start to do that, and that actually reproduces the breathing pattern and the body chemistry of anxiety and panic and trauma. And in fact, people who have had PTSD or they've had anxiety and trauma in their life, it can actually reactivate it. So people have to be careful when they're doing ice bathing and not to force it, because they can actually have an abreaction. They might not cope, but what it does do, it gives you the ability to relive that trauma in a controlled environment where you're in control of it and master it and overcome it. So that can be really, really powerful. And one of the things you can do to overcome that is when you get into the ice bath, or if you're having a cold shower, is you take a really big breath, and as you're going in, you breathe out. And that actually, a sigh is a parasympathetic relaxation signal. So it's telling your body you're in control, you're safe. And there's a few different body signals you can do to tell your body you're safe, and trick your body into coping with more stress than you thought you could handle. And might be talking. There's another very quick poem that I created when I was teaching people to get into ice baths, thinking what are the physical things you can do with your body that activate the parasympathetic nervous system as opposed to the sympathetic nervous system. So when you get into an ice bath and you're in fight and flight, you breathe hard and you want to get out and you tense your muscles and your lips and all of that. So parasympathetic is when you're safe in your cave. That's when you flirt, or it's when you eat. That's when you do fine finger movements and sew and write and do things. So the 10 things you can do with your body, I call them the 10 hacks to relax. It's touch all your fingers, wiggle your toes, soften your stomach, breathe through your nose, sigh, smile, swallow, sing, flutter your eyelids, and focus within. So those 10 activities are all parasympathetically charged. A lot of them to do with breathing. So you're softening your stomach, breathing through your nose, sighing, singing, are having controlled, relaxed breathing. So, and controlled, relaxed breathing is the key for, in that forced mindfulness situation when your body's stressed, to actually take control over what's going on.
That's interesting. So it sounds like a lot of the cues are to reintegrate mind and body are via the breath. And so you don't want to overlook that one. It's important to focus on. And then once you get that in place, then you can look outside the breath at other things as well.
Sure. So, I mean, they often say that, fear is excitement without breath. So you need to keep breathing. And there's so many times in our lives where we're panicking, we're anxious, and we notice we're not breathing, or when you're anxious, you're unconsciously hyperventilating. I have one of my PhD students did 8 years of research on dysfunctional breathing, and we analysed different ways of measuring people clinically how they breathe. But a lot of people with anxiety, and a lot of people in society who have got unexpressed trauma, naturally hyperventilate, and that actually throws out their whole metabolism and their physiology. Just like your heart rate variability, that's become a lot of attention now, where your beat to beat heart rate helps you adjust to what's going on in the present moment. Well, your breath is similar. Your breath, adjusting your breath moment to moment, controls the homeostasis of your body, and it's whether you have control of your breath or your breath is controlling you. And part of the practices that I like to teach and talk about is when you can actually take control of your breath and overcome otherwise difficult situations.
Yeah. Part of that makes me wonder also if you're focusing on just changing the breath itself, if that's like a superficial symptom of the trauma, and if you actually focus on resolving the underlying trauma, if the breath would naturally resolve itself. And like, what's the pro and con to addressing the breath pattern itself versus going deeper and figuring out what's causing the dysfunctional breathing?
Well, often you don't have access to what actually caused it. It could be, perinatal trauma before you actually have words to describe it. And I don't even know if it's necessary to actually identify the trauma and overcome that. But what is necessary is to identify the signals that happen in your body and recognize that, and then use those signals to rewire your nervous system. So when those situations happen, you can actually control them and calm yourself down and gain mastery over your mind and body.
Have you heard of people using Carboxy or some kind of like oxygen and carbon dioxide mixture, inhaling it either as a gas or using a paper bag to inhale their own CO2 at higher concentrations to help overcome fear?
I'm a medical doctor, and I used to do a lot of work in emergency departments, and it's not that uncommon for people to come in thinking they're having a heart attack, and they're panicking, they're hyperventilating, And you do that, you do an ECG and you take a blood test and you realize that they're not having a heart attack, they're having a panic attack. And the solution to that is a paper bag. You rebreathe carbon dioxide, because what they've done, they've blown off all their carbon dioxide, so they get this tingling, and they're really disturbing symptoms. And you can actually do this artificially. I travelled for a while with Wim Hof, and I was giving the science of the Wim Hof method lectures when he toured Australia, and we were getting big groups of people that all hyperventilate to the point of tetany, where their hands are clamping up because they've blown off all their carbon dioxide. The calcium gets reabsorbed and they can't relax their muscles. So it can be quite disturbing. But yeah, breathing into a paper bag during a panic attack is, one it's sort of an extreme method, whereas the 10 hacks to relax is sort of a milder version of that, because you start to slow your breathing, control your breathing. But yeah, the doing breath work is super powerful, because the breath is immediate. And I mean, you can't consciously control your heart rate. So heart rate variability is a really good indicator, but you can't control it consciously, or most, not super yogis can't. I have met people that can. But in terms of the breath, that's something we can control. And the breath is that connector between your autonomic nervous system and your central nervous system that you can control.
On a similar note, have you heard of people like using a hypercompensation strategy where they will actually hyperventilate before they go into, say, an ice bath, so that then their body has to respond to a much greater stimulus? So they hyperventilate and they do pull out all the stops to really engage the parasympathetic afterward, just to make it a larger hormetic response.
Yeah, so I do that when I teach Wim Hof breathing, sort of the hyperventilation and breath holding. There's some activities you can do when you do a breath hold. So usually the practice goes, you hyperventilate, you blow off all your carbon dioxide, so you're starting to be really tingly, and that allows you to trick your body into holding your breath for much longer, so you become hypoxic. And that hypoxia stimulates a lot of really powerful metabolic processes, which we can talk about. But in that hypoxia, if you want to extend the hypoxia, so you basically hold your breath after hyperventilation, and you'll find that most people can double their breath holding time quite comfortably just after hyperventilation. But at the end of that breath hold, you start to become dysphoric. You have this uncomfortable feeling, I need to breathe, I want to hold my breath. And when you get that feeling, what you can do is instead of just releasing your breath and breathing, you actually start to contract all your muscles, and you do a full body muscle contraction. So what you're doing is you're actually making more carbon dioxide, because when you want to breathe, it's the carbon dioxide rise that actually gives you the trigger to breathe. It's not the lack of oxygen. In fact, you can pass out because of lack of oxygen if that carbon dioxide hasn't built up enough. And that's why it's dangerous to do this if you're going underwater. You should not hyperventilate before you take a breath and go underwater, because you can pass out underwater, and people have drowned doing that. But if you're comfortable, you're sitting comfortably, you're lying comfortably, even if you did faint, you're going to come straight back. But when your carbon dioxide builds up and you're becoming quite hypoxic, as you're saying, you can actually increase that hypercapnia, that increase the carbon dioxide in your blood, by doing a full body contraction and squeezing all your muscles and pushing really hard. And that often you'll get about 10 or 15 extra seconds of breath hold that you think you're going to break and you can't last anymore. Then you do that and you actually last longer. So you're actually increasing the stress before you get the relaxation and that release. That's one example of that. Yeah.
I didn't realize that. Sometimes when I was in the sauna, I would do some Wim Hof breathing, and then I would do push-ups at the very end. And I guess that's probably doing something similar. I didn't realize that that's why and how it works, though.
Well, so with push-ups, and people can do I often do this on retreats and in workshops and things, where you get to people to see how many push-ups they can do comfortably. And it might be, some people might be 2, some people might be 20, some people might be more. And then you get them to hyperventilate. And then you get them to do push-ups again, and often they'll do 50% more. And they'll do it while they're holding their breath. So you get them to hyperventilate, hold their breath, and then do push-ups. And they'll do 50% more. And that's because you've blown off the carbon dioxide, you've made your blood quite alkali, and usually it's the build-up of lactic acid that it gives you the pain signal to stop doing that the push-ups or the muscle activity. But if you've already if you're starting from an alkali position because you've blown off all your carbon dioxide and the carbonic acid's been released, then you can actually do more push-ups before you build up the lactic acid necessary to stop you. So yeah, that's another little trick you can do to extend that.
Yeah. I've also been doing some research into a form of training called intermittent hypoxic training recently. And for the most part, it requires some pretty expensive gear if you actually want to do it the way it's done a lot of times in the research.
Rovelva Courtney was my PhD student who did the breathing PhD. I think we published about 8 or 10 papers. She was quite prolific as a PhD student. But she put me onto that. It was like 15 years ago. And at the time I was training to go to Everest Base Camp. And so I actually used one of those machines in preparation for traveling to going up to Everest Base Camp. And basically, what it does, it gives you hypoxic air. So, and you can set the level. So it gives you air at 4,000 meters, 5,000 meters, whatever, until your blood oxygen level goes to drops down to 90, 85, down to 70. You can set the PO2 that you want to achieve, and then it takes you back up again. And it's not just in the tolerating the low oxygen; it's in the change. So it's having the low oxygen, then going back to normal, and then having the low oxygen again and going back to normal. So the fact that it's intermittent, it's not just hypoxic training; it's intermittent hypoxic training. And in fact, when you're doing high altitude trekking, you often do the same thing. So when I went to Everest Base Camp, we do a thing where you hike high and sleep low. So you're thinking you're going up all the time, but you go up a kilometer, you go up 1,000 meters, then you walk down 500 meters and sleep. Then you go up 1,000 meters and you walk down 500 meters and sleep. And that helps you avoid altitude sickness because you're adapting yourself to the low oxygen when you hike up to 1,000 meters, 1,000 meters above where you were, and you go down to 500 meters and sleep there and then adjust. So that intermittentness, and it's in the adjustment that your body then adapts to that stress that's going on.
Yeah, exactly. There's a pretty cool, I think it's a protein in the body called HIF-1 alpha. And that seems like there's a lot of benefits outside of athletic training also for the brain and for the endothelial and the cardiovascular system, all that stuff.
Well, there's a whole lot of metabolic changes that happen with hypoxia. Hypoxia, can be really damaging. Hypoxia can, cause a heart attack or a stroke if you have lack of blood flow. But that's usually a lack of blood flow where the blood stopped and you're not getting rid of waste products. But if you're generally hypoxic, you're still removing the waste products. The blood's still flowing. There's just not a lot of oxygen there. And your body adapts to that in different ways. And it actually releases stem cells. So stem cells are normally buried deep in our bone marrow, and they have a very slow metabolism. They don't like oxygen. They have a very slow metabolism. But when you're hypoxic, those stem cells sort of wake up and start circulating, looking for things to do, and looking for tissue they can replace. So being hypoxic, you actually get stem cell release, and that dysphoria, that discomfort you get with hypoxia, actually releases a chemical called dynorphin. And dynorphin, it's similar to endorphin. Endorphin gets released when you're in, you're running, you get the runner's high, it gives you that sort of opiate sort of high effect, but it's your internal opiates. Well, dynorphin gets released when you're uncomfortable, like at the end of a breath hold or when you're hyperventilating and you really, start to get a bit dizzy and uncomfortable. But what dynorphin does, it increases the number and the sensitivity of endorphin receptors. So by experiencing that discomfort, you're priming yourself to have more comfort later on because you're more sensitive to the endorphins that come later on. So by having that discomfort, having that pain, you actually increase your capacity for pleasure afterwards. And that feeling you get. And a lot of people who do, say, the Wim Hof breathing, they'll do the hyperventilation, they get really dizzy, they do the breath hold, and then they'll do the recovery breath. But what I love to emphasize is after that recovery breath, there's this period, and it can last many minutes, where you just go back into balance, and it's quite euphoric. You get real peacefulness where you don't really need to breathe much at all. So your breath rate is low. I've done this measuring my heart rate using an oximeter, and you can drop your resting heart rate by about 10 beats per minute below what was normally your minimal resting heart rate. So you get into this, I talked about stillness being, the key to activity. Well, after a bout of hyperventilation and then breath holding, you can get this incredible stillness. And I really encourage people, if they're going to do that, to cultivate that. And that's the reward for the discomfort of the hyperventilation and the discomfort of the breath hold. You get this reward of the euphoria of that stillness. That's a really good time to start a meditation session. It's also a really good time to make powerful decisions. So if you've got a life decision you want to make, you want to do it when your mind, your body, your breath, and your gut are all on the same page. So what I like to do is, if I've got decisions to make, you sort of rationally think about all the pros and cons, and you write down all the rational side. Then you work out your gut feeling, how do you feel about it, and then you do an activity that brings your mind, body, and breath all together. And then the decision, that the answer often just shows itself and reveals itself and becomes obvious. Because you've got your whole being is sort of sorting that problem out. It's not just, you're not second guessing yourself with just your mind, and you're not just going with a feeling. You can actually use your whole intelligence, your whole body's intelligence, to solve the problem. It's a really good to have a way into that, or access that body intelligence at a deep level. And these practices can do that.
I love that. My men's group, we would do a couple of rounds of Wim Hof together before we would drop into our session, and there's a profound stillness and clarity and like connectedness that I would feel, and everyone in the group would feel by the end of the session. And it's almost addictive, except for the fact that breath work takes work to actually get to that state.
Yeah, it's hard work. Just like getting into a cold shower, an ice bath. No one really wants to get into an ice bath. But when you do it, well, I had another PhD student who's she's amazing, Lauren Byrne. She won the gold medal for Taekwondo at the Sydney Olympics, and she's in the Australian Sports Hall of Fame. So she's a super peak performer. And her PhD was interviewing people who had won multiple world championships. So they've been the world champion in their sport for multiple years, just to be on her interview list. And she asked them, what do you attribute your success to? How do you stay at the top of the world in your sport for multiple years? And I mean, she published a whole PhD on this, and she's published that. We've done a couple of academic papers on it. And some of the things that came up, mindset was the most important. One of the things that hadn't been that well talked about in the literature was social connection, having a friendship group who appreciate you for who you are, not because you're a winner or a loser or whatever. But the thing that all the athletes did was ice bathing. And they said that they were introduced to ice bathing for recovery practices, for training, but they kept on doing it for the mental health benefits that it gave them. And they said, we didn't want to, no one wants to get into an ice bath, but when you're in an ice bath, it brings you into the present moment. You're not thinking about the competition or what happened yesterday or cursing yourself for not doing better. You're creating a discipline of doing something that you didn't want to do and realizing you can do it. And they all continue the ice bathing for the mental health benefits. And now we know that there's research on depression with cold water swimming and ice bathing, for example. But there are mental health benefits that I think are quite underrated. A lot of people talk about ice bathing for the physical benefits, and but the mental health and just the fact that you can force yourself to do something that you didn't really want to do and get a benefit from that is a really great practice. So I'd encourage people to find something you don't like to do and practice doing it.
I find it striking that the social connection and the mindset, like those are pretty universal across all different health and longevity goals. It seems to those always matter. They're on every list of like the experts and the highest performers. And initially, when you were first mentioning ice bathing, I was thinking that perhaps it's a selection bias, because in order to make the highest levels, you need to train often. In order to train often, you have to recover and really recover like a pro, because you are a pro. And perhaps that they were just using the ice bath because it helps them with the recovery. But to hear that they actually used it initially for the recovery and they transitioned into using it more for the mindset, or in addition for the mindset benefits, I found that interesting.
Well, that's right. And in fact, if you look at the research on ice bathing for recovery, it's not clear cut. I mean, there's been some, it's not straightforward that, definitely ice bathing improves recovery. And certainly people who want to, grow muscles are encouraged not to ice bathe, because you want to have that inflammation to then, have muscle hypertrophy. But in terms of the mental health benefits, and this is what the athletes' feedback was that we love to do ice bathing because of the mental resilience it gave us, not so much the physical resilience.
Well, Dr. Mark, do you also like bathing for other reasons, for such as like perhaps you add minerals to your water?
I'm a big hot spring aficionado, and I'm sort of really blessed because I have a job. I'm the medical director of the Peninsula Hot Spring Group, and they have 5 hot springs in Australia, one in New Zealand, which I'm also co-owner of, and 4 in Australia. That and I get to, as part of my job, go around the world visiting hot springs, and every hot spring is different. They all have different mineral combinations, different temperatures, and often around hot springs, they have saunas and steam rooms, and cold plunges and cold rooms, and other great experiences. So I'm a big fan of that. When I have a bath here at home, I almost always, well, pretty much always put in magnesium salt, and often sometimes some essential oils and some other bath oils as well. So yeah, I love to have that alchemy of bathing as well. And one of the great things about bathing, I've sort of made it part of my career, where I can travel the world, go to visit hot springs, and so I've become friends with a lot of hot spring owners around the world. So all around, and wherever I go in the world, I mean, there are hot springs in every continent, pretty much every country. So wherever you go in the world, you can go visit a hot spring. And because I'm in that industry, I've become friends with the owners, and it becomes a social thing. So I can bathe socially, and I was just talking to Charles yesterday about having my 60th birthday party and having a party at the hot springs, and what a great thing to have bathing as a focus. But I can invite all my friends to come and bathe with me, and even if they're not your friends, I've noticed if I'm in a hot pool, in a hot spring, bathing with other people, the conversations you have and the personal connection you have bathing with other people is much more intimate than talking at a bar or at a restaurant or some other social environment, because you're there with your body, you're tolerating it, and it can be just thermo-neutral, so you're totally relaxed, and in that relaxed environment, the social connectivity you have, I feel that I have, is more profound.
Yeah, I like that. In the gym I go to back in Austin, Texas, the sauna is the watering hole for great conversations and new connections and everything. But there's a obvious time limitation, because when you're in 185-degree Fahrenheit temperature, 190-degree, you can only last so long, and other people only last so long as well. I love the idea of a thermo-neutral spring. They don't seem to be as common as the extremes.
Well, that's another thing that I'm on a bit of a mission to promote the benefits of stillness. So even and similar with the breathing that I talked about, where people do the hyperventilation and the breath hold, they don't spend as much time in the relaxation. The same with contrast bathing. People do the sauna and then the cold plunge, but it's really important once you've done the sauna and the cold plunge that you then spend time resting and coming back into balance. And that for me is the joy. That's the benefit of the hot and the cold. Then you come back and you practice relaxing while you're relaxed, and that becomes super powerful. And it is much more socially conducive, because if you're in the sauna or the steam room, you can start chatting, but once you start to really heat up, you want to go inside. It's an internal thing, because that forced mindfulness makes you mindful of your body, and it's much harder to chat to someone else when you're just trying to survive and build up your tolerance. But then after the relaxation, when you're in the thermo-neutral environment, that's when you can be totally relaxed and at peace, and really connect again, I was saying that you make better decisions when you're in that state, but you also make better interpersonal connections, because you're projecting your more authentic self, because you're more coherent. Your whole body and mind are more together, so you can actually be more of who you are, and then that gets accepted, so you have a more of an intimate connection with other people.
So say my gym doesn't have a thermo-neutral environment aside from perhaps the outside air. How would you recommend slowly integrating that, rather than going from one extreme to the next and then quickly getting dressed and going about my day?
So it is really challenging. So I've got friends who, they'll go down to live near a river, and they'll go and swim in the river, in cold, in the middle of winter, but they don't have that thermo-neutral environment to relax afterwards. So, and it might just be, and I've said to them, just lie down in your car, or find somewhere to lie down at the gym. I don't know. Often locker rooms don't have great relaxation environment. And gyms and even hot springs, they're really strapped to space. So in Europe, they do it really well. You go to European hot springs and they've got lots of beds, and you see all these people just lying around sleeping. In Australia and pretty much America and other places, it's not so much. But it's really worth, once you've done extreme hot or extreme cold, and preferably you've done both, to find somewhere where you can just totally relax and almost do a yoga nidra. Imagine going to a yoga class and you do the yoga stretches, and after the last stretch, everyone just walks out and gets dressed without doing the relaxation at the end. You sort of feel cheated, because it's the relaxation at the end of the yoga class that sort of anchors all the benefits. And it's the same with contrast bathing. It's, and the general protocol would be to rinse, then do hot, cold, rest, and then repeat. And I like to do, if I'm doing a proper session, I like to do 3 rounds. So the first round is just sort of orienting yourself. How do I feel today? Did I eat well last night? Did I sleep? What is my tolerance today? Because your tolerance to heat or cold will change every day. So the first round, you're sort of orienting yourself and seeing how you feel. The second round, you go deeper, and the third round, you go even, much deeper again. So it is really beneficial to try and do 3 rounds if you can. But then to have that rest at the end and finish on that rest is where all the benefit is for your body, because that's when you come back into homeostasis. So your body can come back into balance. So your stress hormones get released, your blood pressure comes down, your breath rate comes down, the mental chatter in your mind gets dissipated. So then you become more whole. And it's a shame to deprive yourself of that. You're doing the pain without the benefit. So whatever that means for you, whether it's finding even somewhere in a waiting room, it can be in your car. And often you do need a controlled environment. So a lot of hot springs where they're outside, you can't just relax if it's freezing cold outside, or if it's really under the sun or something. So you need a temperature controlled environment. And I would treat it like you would a yoga class. So you've done the stretch one way with the heat, you've done the stretch the other way with the cold, and then you come back into the relaxation, but you don't want to deprive yourself of that relaxation.
What's the Dr. Marc protocol? So you start with heat, then you go to cold, then you take like how long is your break between the?
So usually I rinse, and so when I teach this, and there's about a dozen therapists at the hot springs who do this every day. They do 4 times a day. They run these sessions. So we talk about rinsing, which is getting rid of all your personal care products, and if you use them, but also preparing your body for sensation and realizing that you're coming into a ritual space. So rinsing, like, or your skin gets wetted and touched, and you're preparing yourself for a sort of ritual space. Then you do the heat. And the heat could be a hot pool. It could be a sauna, it could be a steam room. So there's different ways of heat. And sometimes I like to mix. So if you do 3 rounds, you might do 1 round in the hot pool at 42 degrees or 43. Last week, or a week and a half ago, I was in California, and at Harbin Hot Springs, they've got a 45-degree centigrade pool, which is super hot. You just have to really breathe just to get in there. So you do the heat first, and then you do the cold, and you can mix it up with just cold air. So you might just be walking around, and I do that often at home here in Melbourne in wintertime. I'll have a really hot bath, so hot that after 5 or 10 minutes I have to get out, and then I go outside and I lie in a hammock. And, in the cold air, it might be 5 or 10 degrees centigrade. But you can last probably 10, 15 minutes after your body's heated up in the hammock. So you slowly cool down, and then you get to the point where you're a little bit shivery and, hey, it's time to go back, and then you can hop back in the bath. So there are different ways of modulating your temperature, but it's really valuable to be able to do that. So my protocol is rinse, the hot, cold, the rest is really important, and if you can, to repeat.
Funny you mentioned Harbin Hot Springs in California. That's one of the few public hot springs I've been to, aside from a couple different deserts. But yeah, I had good experience there. Also, that one is very hot. Between the hot and the cold, or I guess after the hot and cold, are you resting like 5 minutes or an hour? Like, how long do you give your body to come back to baseline?
5 to 10 minutes is good. You can do it longer if you want to do a meditation or if you want to do something else. Similar to what you would do at a yoga class, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of a deep relaxation. But you really want to get to the point where you're feeling really calm and collected and at peace with yourself and the world. And that's such a beautiful feeling that why not prolong it? But I think anything less than 5 minutes, you're probably not quite there.
I know that personally, I used to not like to sit around during my sauna sessions. So I would do some kind of training with blood flow restriction training or just body weight training, meditations, just something to like stack biohacks at the same time. Do you like to just focus on the sauna itself, or do you ever combine different modalities together?
Oh, there's so many things you can do in a sauna. And I love creating these. So one of the things when we talk about extending the stay, like when you're breath holding, you can contract your body and extend your breath hold. Well, in a sauna, when you're really hot and you think you have to get out because it's unbearable, I get ice water, and there's different ways to practice it. But the easiest way is to get a plastic bottle with some ice water, and if you've got an ice bath, you just grab a bottle full of ice water with a nail hole in the bottom of the bottle. So there's a very, very fine stream of ice water that you can put on your head, on the back of your neck, and you get the shiver giggles. It makes you, gives you that whole, or you put the ice water on your feet. And what that does, you're feeling really, really hot, but suddenly you've got this ice water dripping down the back of your neck and on your head or on your feet. And suddenly that ice water feels just delightful. It brings your sensations back into your body and it cools you down so you can actually stand the heat longer. Another thing to do in sauna, and not if you've got an infrared sauna, you can't do that because you can't use water inside an infrared sauna, which is one of the drawbacks of infrared, because I loved using cold water in a sauna. But the other thing you can do in a sauna, especially if you're using steam, but even without steam, is to get a fan, and like a Chinese fan, and move the air around. And in Europe, they do Aufguss. They use towels and they waft the air around. It's a whole performance. But when you start moving steam around, you get conduction because the air is touching your body and taking the heat in or out. But then you get convection as well. And that increases either hot or cold. So the heat and the cold is carried by water. So if you're in a dry sauna, you can tolerate much, much hotter than if you're in a steam sauna or if there's humidity there. So when you put steam in, it reduces your tolerance. And then if you move that steam around, that really blasts you. So, and I do this with other people, and I like to do it myself. So you'll create steam, and then you'll fan yourself, and you can really blast yourself and be the hottest you've ever felt. Because when you got steam just pushing on your body, so that's really forcing heat into your body with conduction and convection. But similarly in an ice bath, if you move the water around an ice bath, it's much colder than if you're still in an ice bath. And it's for the same reason, because the water is transferring heat from conduction and convection. So taking a fan into a sauna or a bottle of ice water into a sauna, using essential oils in the sauna is also great. There's a whole lot of amazing essential oils that help with mucolytics, to break up mucus, that enhance the immune system, that just enhance your experience and the smell and the scent. I love sort of stacking things, and you can increase as many. Humming humming's great actually in an ice bath. Omming or humming, because that you get the prolonged expiration. It stops you hyperventilating. So instead of you go and you force people to hum, it naturally relaxes you. Or it naturally relaxes you. At the Peninsula Hot Springs, there's a hammam. It's a steam room, like a traditional Turkish one with a dome. And when you hum in there, the whole room vibrates. And that's a great thing. So using sound, sound to accent to increase your experience, but it's also you get this incredible resonance that happens, and you can actually join other people doing that. And we've had amazing humming sessions there where you get the incredible vocal harmonics that happen just by really soft humming will be amplified in the room, so it fills the whole room. So there's some really great little tricks like that that I love to sort of discover and play with and share with your audience, but also with my friends and the wider public.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm thinking about the ways you could create like a different style of contrast here too. You could have a sauna with the sound, the light, the scents from the essential oils, and then you can go from that and contrast it with like a sensory deprivation chamber or something like that. And I'm sure that would have all kinds of different effects than say a cold bath after.
Well, the sensory deprivation is when you want to do the relaxation. That's thermo-neutral, and it's like that yoga nidra space. I've got another good friend of mine who makes these bee meditation huts, which is like a little yoga nidra space built on top of beehives, and there's slits in the floor where the pheromones from the beehive come into your space. The bees can't get to you, but the pheromones can, and the shell of the honey can, and the buzzing can. So you're literally lying on top of these beehives, hearing the bee humming, and you actually get the humming is a drone that actually has an ambience and a modulation to it, and it's just comforting to your nervous system. And we don't know what the pheromones do. There's actually, I think in Romania, there's it's a registered medical treatment for lung disease where you actually breathe the pheromones out of the beehive. And apparently that's not that great for the bees. If you're sucking, they have like a tube and they suck the air from the beehive and just bring that. And then you're stripping the beehive of their pheromones. And the bees don't know what's going on because they need their pheromones to control their whole social activity. But if you're in the room with them and it just slits in the floor, you're not taking the pheromones away from them. You're just circulating around in your room. And that's really powerful to have that deep relaxation as a connection with nature. And similar forest bathing, shirin-yoku, which is being out in nature where you're actually exchanging DNA and resonance with the trees and the plants and the fungi and the soil and all of that. It just enhances your experience. So, nature there's still a lot we have to learn about this, a lot we don't understand, but you can experience it directly, and you don't need to fully understand it to experience it.
Well, Dr. Marc, I want to do a follow-up episode, if you're willing, on more of these like futuristic ancient medicines, because I had never heard of bee pheromones, and I'm sure there's lots of those types of things that you come across in your research. But I want to continue down the contrast therapy rabbit hole we went down and talk more about that in this one, because we already are running out of time. But when it comes to contrast therapy, whether it's the hot, the cold, or the still afterward, what are the big mistakes you see people making?
So the biggest one is they don't respect the stillness. They do the hot or the cold, and then they just go on with their life and get dressed and continue, rather than really anchoring that benefit. So that's probably the biggest one. The other one is that social pressure, but I did these big events with Wim Hof, and you get all the alpha males and the alpha females, all the firefighters and martial artists, and they want to push themselves really hard. But I think it's not that great to push yourself really hard and go hard immediately. You want to ease yourself into it. So you want to orient yourself and feel comfortable at every stage, not just, suffer through it and tolerate it. After I sort of worked, it was about 2016 when I was traveling with Wim Hof doing that. I did another tour in Australia, and it was with Therese Kerr, who's Miranda Kerr's mum, and she had this organic skincare range, and we did this wellness tour around Australia. And the audience there was totally different. It was like 40 to 70-year-old women. They weren't the alpha type, and we did breathing and ice bathing with them. And for them, the hardest thing was actually not the ice bathing; it was actually being comfortable seeing bathers by their peers. It was like this social thing that was challenging for them. But one of the things I sort of came up with was a way to ease yourself into hot and cold bathing that's gentle, because saunas and ice baths are quite extreme, and there's a whole it's not really a poem, but it's a little song and dance routine that I came up with. I call it the cold water hokey pokey, and it's something you can do at home in your own shower. And it starts, just have a normal hot shower, and that's comfortable. At the end of your hot shower, you turn the heat up. So you make yourself a little bit prickly hot and flushed. So you're actually getting, you're quite hot. And at that point, and the hardest thing in any contrast bathing, the hardest thing is the decision to do it. So once you're really hot, you make the decision, you turn the hot water off and the cold water on, but you just wet your left foot. And that's okay, because your body's really hot. And you just wear your left foot. I can tolerate the cold of my left foot. And then you do your leg. Then you do your right foot and your leg, and your left hand and arm and your other hand and arm. And then you keep breathing calmly and smile to yourself, because that's what it's all about, being relaxed in that stress. And what that first round has done is you push the hot blood in your arms and legs. You push that into your core, because you've vasoconstricted your limbs. So you're still feeling quite warm. And then you take a big breath in, and as you're breathing out slowly, as you're sighing, you put your left side in. And normally when the water would hit your neck, that's where the blood vessels are quite close to the surface. Normally you'd gasp. But if you're already sighing like that, then you feel the cold, but you don't get the gasp and you don't get the emotional reaction. So you put your left side in as you're sighing, your right side in, your front side in, and you turn yourself around. You keep breathing calmly and smile to yourself because that's what it's all about. And then you take another big breath, and as you sigh, you put your whole head in. And move your head around, stand still, get a drenching, slowly turn yourself around, continue breathing calmly, smile to yourself because that's what it's all about. And then you do the hokey pokey song, and you go, oh, hokey pokey, and you put the water on your kidneys. Go, oh, hokey pokey, put the water on your groin. And oh, hokey pokey, put the water on your armpits. And by that time, what you've done, you've braced your whole body for the cold, and you'll find yourself standing under the cold water, and you'll be breathing relaxed, and you're feeling calm. And at that point, you can turn the water off and get out. And it takes about a minute. And at that point, you've spent about a minute, you've started your day singing and dancing, and you feel really alive and invigorated after the cold shower. But even that can be too much for people. So you can just start the first round, just do the first verse, just your arms and legs for a few days. And then you work up to the second verse and the third verse. So I think people going straight into it without any practice and then traumatizing themselves, I think that's an issue. So you want to be gentle with yourself. You want to be able to tolerate it. You want to stay in control all the way. And there are people who have, most people have unresolved trauma. That's just, if you're a human being, you've probably got unresolved trauma. And some people that's really serious. So you want to be gentle with yourself. You don't want to, beat up on yourself or force yourself. And I think that's a mistake that people make, thinking, if I can't tolerate it, I'm weak. But it's just, it's like you wouldn't force someone to do the split straight away. You'd get them to gradually loosen their hips and warm up and stretch and over maybe months, loosen up their joints so they can, do a wide split. It's the same with contrast bathing. You don't want to just, everybody's different. Even you're different at different times and different days and how you feel. So you want to respect that and take it easy and guide yourself. But you do want to push yourself to the limit, but realizing your limits will change. And you don't want to exceed those limits because just like if you exceed those limits when you're stretching, you're going to hurt yourself and you reduce your flexibility rather than increase it.
Yeah, that's a great tip. I see that a lot is the competition. Well, how many minutes did you do at what temperature? It's like, well, it's not always about who did longer at the colder temperature.
Yeah, and with breath holding, I did 3 minutes, I did 4 minutes. And so it's not about it's nice to have an idea of the time just to orient yourself how you're feeling today. And, oh, wow, I'm feeling really good. Or this is not, wow, I can only hold it for 2 minutes, 3 minutes today, whatever that is. But the number's not important. It's the feeling that you get. And often people, because often people say, how long should I be in the sauna? And how long do I stay in the ice bath? Well, it's not about the time. And even with the sauna, it depends on the humidity, it depends on the temperature, it depends on how you feel, all of those things. So it's really about orienting yourself to the internal feelings that you're generating when you're under stress. So that's the key.
I think I'm going to try that. I'm going to take your idea of multiple rounds, the first one as an orientation, and then the stillness between and after each round. And then also you've alluded to the difference between infrared and traditional saunas. The explanation of what they are is a bit long for the final minutes of the podcast, but do you have a preference between traditional and infrared?
I have both. I'm lucky I've got 2 saunas here at home. But I prefer the traditional sauna. One, because it's up near my swimming pool and it's more convenient to jump in the pool and hot tub and shower. But I love the traditional sauna because you can play with the steam and you can play with water. So I love having the steam, and you can put essential oils on the rocks and create steam, and you move the steam around with the fan. And you can also put the ice water over you in the traditional sauna. So for me, that's a strong preference. But it really, whatever makes you sweat, it's the sweating, it's the feeling that you get that's the benefit. How you get there is actually less important. I just like the traditional because it's, I like playing with toys, with fans and water and oils and stuff. So that's more available, I think, in the traditional sauna, the infrared sauna.
We also talked a lot about water. And do you use like reverse osmosis to filter your water before you bathe in it and or consume it, including in the shower, or do you use something else?
Not reverse osmosis. And in fact, I ended up creating a whole company around water filtration, because as a doctor, I was telling people, water is, it's the operating system of your consciousness. You need to change your water. You need to have filtered water. And people would say to me, so what water filter should I get? And I'd say, well, it's really complicated. And they'd say, well, you've got a medical degree and 2 PhDs. If you can't work it out, how are we supposed to work it out? So I actually did a whole lot of research on this. I went to different water conferences. I actually spoke at the International Conference on the Physics, Chemistry and Biology of Water in 2016 in Bulgaria, which is George Pollack, who has the 4th phase of water. He's got an amazing video on the 4th phase of water. People haven't watched that. And I went down the water rabbit hole and realized it's really important to bathe in beautiful water. That's my little recipe for wellness. Starts with bathe in beautiful water. And it's probably more important to bathe in chlorine-free water than it is to drink chlorine-free water. And they actually did some research on this in the late 1990s. It's on PubMed if people want to look it up. But what they did is they got people to drink chlorinated water, and they measured the disinfection byproducts, ethylene and trihalomethanes and things in their blood. And when you drink chlorinated water, it doesn't appear in your blood because your liver filters it out. So it gives your liver a high impact, and it's not great for your liver, but it doesn't appear in your blood. Then they got people to have a bath in chlorinated water, but they were wearing a wetsuit, so the water couldn't touch their skin. So they were just breathing the bath air. And they saw this huge spike in all these disinfection byproducts, because they're volatile and they come in through your lungs and they bypass your liver and go straight into your blood. Then they did the same thing where they breathed fresh air, but the water was touching their skin. And again, the disinfection byproducts went straight through your skin into your bloodstream, bypassing the liver, and you got this huge spike in disinfection byproducts. So it's really important to bathe in chlorine-free water. And the other thing is that people don't realize, I think we're starting to realize, is your skin has over 2 million little sweat glands and sebaceous glands and hairs where the skin dips down and goes back up. And at the base of those little clefts there's oils that your skin secretes. And those oils protect your skin from UV radiation. They protect your skin from drying out. So it protects you from wrinkles and aging. They also feed good bacteria that protect you from bad bacteria. And when you're bathing in chlorinated water, you're oxidizing those oils and you're stripping away the good bacteria from your skin. So you're actually removing this protective layer that your body has evolved to have. And you're making yourself more susceptible to sun damage, to wrinkles, to aging, and to infections. So when you start to bathe in beautiful water, in water that's not chlorinated, that's filtered, it takes probably 2 or 3 weeks, just like it would in your gut microbiome. Your biome changes, your skin changes, the oils start to change, and your skin starts to feel better. So it's a really powerful thing. But reverse osmosis, you can't get the flow rate to bathe in it because it's quite a slow process. It wastes a lot of water, it wastes a lot of energy. And you don't want to drink reverse osmosis water either, because minerals are good for you. And drinking reverse osmosis strips the minerals out of your body. So I ended up finding this Russian technology, which is a combination of activated carbon with this ecopolymer that's silver impregnated that forces the water to go into vortexes. So it naturally alkalinizes the water, and it converts the calcium crystals from calcite, which are these brick-shaped molecules of the calcium, and they form scale, into aragonite, which is like a diamond shape that flow over each other. So it stopped scale build up in your water, your heater, your water heater and your kettles, and even on your glassware or on your shower screen, but also in your body and on your hair and on your skin. So you don't get this mineral buildup. So having filtered water, so chlorine-free water, is really important. If you can't afford a filter, I said I like to sell people stuff, but I tell them how to do it themselves for free. Well, if you don't have a whole house water filter, if you fill up your bath really, really hot, put the fan on and wait 15 minutes. A lot of those volatile compounds will outgas. The fan will take them away, and then you can have a relatively chlorine-free bath, without having a filter. But that's sort of, so when I go to hotels and travel around, I love bathing. I don't want to, bathing's not optional. Bathing's compulsory, but you don't want to bathe in poison. And chlorine is poison. So yeah,
I'm in India and I don't have the ability to install a whole house filter of any kind. I'm stuck with what they have. Do you recommend any like point of use shower filters, like something you just screw on?
yeah. So there's some KDF filters. I don't actually sell them. There's a lot of them on the market. So the KDF shower filter is like a shower rose that you can get that will remove most of the chlorine, and that's so worth having. And especially if you've got eczema, dandruff, dry skin, any sort of skin condition, or even if you're prone to sunburn, because without that, say you're stripping away your natural protection from the sun and from the wind and from the elements.
And that's even before we're using abrasive chemicals and detergents and all that kind of stuff on our skin. That's just from the water itself.
Absolutely. And then it gets even worse when you're talking about your gut, because I mean the bacteria on our skin, we're only just understanding the skin microbiome is not as well as understood as the gut microbiome, and the gut microbiome is still being worked out. I was talking to a company, Microba, that do microbiome analysis, and they say for every 6 people they analyze, they find a brand new bacteria that's never been documented before. So we're still just understanding what's going on with the gut microbiome. It's super complex. But then you think most people, they have antibiotics. They have, there's glyphosate on pretty much everything in the States, but most of the world now, which attacks bacterial pathways, chlorine in our water. And the other thing is we don't eat living foods anymore. Most of the foods people eat are fermented foods. So things like bread and cheese and wine and beer and tea and coffee and chocolate, they're all fermented, but they're not alive. Whereas you look at our ancestors, most cuisines, there would be something living on your plate, a little bit of kimchi or sauerkraut or yogurt or kefir or kombucha or something that's got probiotic activity that's alive. And we miss out on that in the modern world. And it's so easy to bring back into your life. As I say, one of the companies I've created is called Extremely Alive, and we make living probiotic kombucha vinegars, and we infuse them with herbs. But people can make kombucha themselves. And in fact, the vinegars we sell are a probiotic, and if you just fed that green tea, sweet tea, you could actually make kombucha from it, because it's actually a living culture. But to make kombucha at home yourself is super easy. And most people don't realize it. They think, oh, it spoils, it goes off, I neglect it. If you neglect your kombucha for 6 months or so, or even 6 months, it'll turn to vinegar. And that vinegar is super potent and it's probiotic. So you can actually use that. And we might have to have a whole another episode, because one of the most powerful ancient medicines are called oxymals. And oxymals are acid honeys. So it's mixing vinegar with honey. And that's what Hippocrates prescribed. Hippocrates, he said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. But what he was talking about was vinegar and honey, as they're both foods and medicines. And in ancient Persia, there were 1,200 recipes for oxymals. So the vinegar and honey combinations were the base for all their medicine. And again, this is something you can do at home. Make some kombucha, ignore it for 6 months, will turn to vinegar. Go to your local beekeeper, get some raw natural honey, unprocessed honey, mix that with your vinegar, and you've got this incredible base. I mean, that itself is super medicinal, but then that can be used. I mean, honey and vinegar salad dressing, right? But you can make it more potent, and it becomes like a kombucha syrup concentrate. You can actually add a whole lot of other herbs to. And I actually really like adding a bitter herb to it, because you've got the sourness of the vinegar and the sweetness of the honey. So you add a bitter herb like andrographis or dandelion or coffee or cacao. So you've got the bitter, salty, sour and sweet. And the salty comes from the vinegar as well a bit. So you've got this blending of flavors. In India, they have Chyawanprash. I don't know if you've seen Chyawanprash, which is like Indian health jam. And I think the recipe for Chyawanprash is like 3,000 years old or more. And it had like 58 different herbs in it. And amla was the main one, which is the high vitamin C. But it's also ghee. But it's basically ghee and honey mixed with all these different herbs. It's like an Indian health jam. But it's sweet and salty and spicy and sour and bitter all at the one. So it blends all the different five flavors. So it's a really, if you're in India, go and get some Chyawanprash and try it. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Dr. Marc, I have a lot of things earmarked for our next conversation. If you're willing to come back on, I'd love to host you again. This has been a blast. I can't believe it's already been over an hour. But if people want to connect with you, if they want to follow your work, to check out some of your products and companies, how do they find you on the internet?
So I've got a website, which is just Dr. Marc, drmarc.co. So drmarc.co is my website. Most of my products, all my academic papers and other things, and a lot of my poetry is there. And Facebook and LinkedIn are the main two. I don't really do Instagram. I've got a account, but I don't really use it. So Facebook and LinkedIn and my website are the main two. They can contact me through the website if people want to. And I think it's nice. There's one poem that I'd love to end with, and it's a poem that I came up in the start of the pandemic, where I was thinking of all the things you can do at home that have research evidence that they improve immunity and reduce anxiety, but that they also can be done at home with no cost, training, or equipment. And I started writing this list of all these different activities that people do in lockdown, and came up with 50 activities. And as I put them together, it turned into a poem. So this poem, I talk about it. This is a way you can go from wired and tired to chilled and fulfilled, or from stressed and depressed to joyfully blessed. So I call this poem The Whirl of Wellness. So the whirl of wellness: hold someone's hand, gaze into their eyes. Go barefoot in nature, bask in sunrise. Choose a dance partner and go find your groove. Do Tai Chi or yoga, mindfully move. Share a massage, enjoy healing touch. Focus on one thing and don't think too much. Make time for a hobby. Play chess, fly a kite. Make use of your hands, draw, paint, sew or write. Help someone in need. Donate to a cause. Play games. Meditate. Read stuff from bookstores. Turn off your screens and get a good sleep. Declutter, spark joy, and love what you keep. Dig around in a garden, pick up a guitar, slip into a bathtub, sauna or spa. Care for a pet, take up a sport. Go on vacation and make your home a resort. Lie in a hammock, relieve pent-up stress. Relax and do nothing, and then do even less. Laugh out loud, share a joke, give someone a kiss, say a prayer, chant a mantra, and follow your bliss.
Beautiful. That is such a great way to end. And again, I want to print both of these out so far, the ones you've shared. And I'm looking forward to exploring some more of your health poetry, because lots of different actionable things we can all do there that don't involve any crazy supplements or other therapies or practices, just very simple, natural practices.
So if you look up wellness poems on my website, they're all there, and you can download them, share them. Please, I think the more they get distributed, the better the world will have. So thank you for giving me the platform to share my work. I'm really, really happy to do that. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me on the podcast today. And until next time, I'm Nick Urban here with Dr. Marc Cohen, signing out from mindbodypeak.com. Have a great week and be an outlier. I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.